Filming Italy, il cinema incontra l'arte. Sono molto felice di essere qui oggi in una location bellissima, meravigliosa. Siamo al Pantheon e veramente ringrazio il Ministero, ringrazio la Sovrintendenza, ringrazio la dottoressa Gabriella Musto perché questa è una location eccezionale ed essere qui oggi per questa intervista speciale che Filming Italy, il cinema incontra l'arte, perché proprio l'obiettivo di Filming Italy è far incontrare questa meravigliosa arte con il cinema e farli in qualche modo parlare insieme, conversare, perché poi tutto andrà sulla piattaforma di Filming Italy, sul metaverso, per i ragazzi giovani, per fargli, diciamo, in qualche modo fare un'esperienza diversa, dove loro possono visitare il Pantheon attraverso l'intervista che faremo oggi con una leggenda del cinema, con un'icona del cinema internazionale, Bo Derek. Welcome, Bo. I'm very happy that you accept the invitation to do this masterclass for Filming Italy, il cinema incontra l'arte, and I would love to thank you, Steven Gaidos. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for having us here and giving me this opportunity to spend time with one of the great stars of Hollywood, and for both of us to be in front of one of the great places on the planet Earth. If you cannot be moved here, nothing will move you, right, Bo?
I am stunned. Thank you, Tiziana, so much. I cannot believe that my life has taken me on this journey to end up here right now, just three people. I can die now, I guess. I was here a few hours ago with 1,000 tourists, so it's so bizarre.
Bo, I have to say you look really right at home here.
Do I?
But you have traveled the world in your career and had a great life in Hollywood and on location making films. When we chatted the other night in Sardinia
Yes.
at Tiziana's Filming Italy Festival, you said something interesting, that you felt that you had an access or an insight into three entire generations of Hollywood history.
Yes.
Since this is a master class, let's do a little history lesson for the young people. What are those three generations?
Well, my husband was, I fell in love with my husband when I was 17. He was 46, and his parents were in silent movies. He was a Hollywood star of so many films in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So, and then I came along in the late 70s, and I feel I lived three generations, and all his stories, you know, even though he passed away 25 years ago, but all the stories and the history and the friends. I was able to make friends with so many legends.
Didn't you tell me that his mother actually acted in a movie with Valentino, maybe the last movie of Valentino?
Yeah, the last movie that Valentino was making, correct me, I think he was directing.
I don't know my silent. Was
Yeah.
it still in the silent era or after?
I'm not sure.
But
I'm
it
not
was late.
sure.
And we're talking about Rudolph Valentino, not Valentino, the great designer.
Yeah.
Do you have, if you look back over your life in Hollywood and your love and deep knowledge of movies, do you have an era or a type of film or filmmakers that are most special to you? If someone says to Bo Derek, let's go watch a movie tonight, I want you to pick out a classic, pick out a great movie that maybe I haven't seen. What might you show them?
Oh my goodness. I am the biggest fan of movies. And recently, I think because of COVID, honestly, I live in the country. So what do you do when the sun goes down and you've worked with the horses and the garden and everything? We watch at least 3 hours every night, my husband and I. And I think that I have this new feeling that every once in a while I finish and I think, I just saw a perfect movie.
Good.
And it's so rare.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously almost anything Coppola did. The first movie that really affected me in my adult life was Apocalypse Now.
Wow.
And
made the same year as 10, your big...
yes.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes. And what was I watching the other night? Good Morning Vietnam.
Yeah, Robin
I mean,
Williams.
it just,
Great.
every once in a while, a film goes from scene to scene and it builds and it speeds up and it slows down. And there's a musicality to filmmaking that's a mystery to me.
Yeah.
I was in a place in my career after 10, and it was such a success, and I was such a sensation. I mean, me, the character,
Yeah.
that I could do anything I wanted for a moment in the industry.
Yeah.
And I was very confused, and there were people coming to the office with a bag full of cash.
Wow.
Just sign anything. Just sign it.
Make the movie.
Yeah, whatever
Make the
your
movie.
project is next,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah. And that was the real birth of the home video moment, where the industry had been a little bit down. It started going way up because you had overseas video, home video, VHS, and people did literally come back from Cannes with suitcases of cash from making deals. What a nice moment.
I can't tell you how crazy it was, and I was very confused, and it was my husband's suggestion. He said, you know, everybody's exploiting you. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what the business is. Why don't you do it yourself? And I loved filmmaking so much, so I ended up producing my next 3 movies, and I was able to learn every aspect of filmmaking, which taught me that's still a mystery. That perfect movie.
You experienced it in full on both sides of the camera. Were there actresses from the old days of when you were a kid growing up to now? Are there actresses you look at and you say, that's a great screen actress, that's a great screen star for me?
How many?
Yeah.
And in my husband's day, my first husband's day, they had support of the studio.
Yeah.
Which sometimes
Good
hindered
and bad.
them.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking Betty Davis, of course.
Yeah.
But would Betty Davis have been Betty Davis if she hadn't been groomed
Yeah.
and supported? And then she broke away, which is very admirable, and took control of her own career. Didn't work for a long time because
it
she
all
was so
changed.
strong. Yeah. But still, I think that support was positive.
Yeah. And of course, you know, I love that you chose Betty Davis, the first name that came to mind, because my God, she embodied everything and had a long career because she was an ingenue. And then she was the older actress in All About Eve, which was a huge movie. And then she came back and broke all the rules and made Baby Jane, whatever happened to Baby Jane in the 60s.
Yeah.
Just no vanity whatsoever.
Incredible.
And she was something else. You know, you came of age very quickly in the 70s and moved into this this movie moment, which we'll talk about. But I'm just curious, we have students watching us. If you can think back to when it's really starting for you, you're really walking in the doors of Hollywood for the first time. What were your first impressions of the town, the business? You're a girl from a town out of Hollywood. You didn't grow up in show business. You meet John. Suddenly everything's changing and people are paying attention to you. Do you remember any first impressions of the business? People who were kind or unkind, or how it was?
Kind or unkind, yes. There's a lot of both.
Yeah. Who was kind to you, or do you remember anyone specifically in the early days that you thought, I'm so grateful they were a decent lady or a decent chap? Anyone come to mind?
The Italians. I'm not saying that just because I'm here, but this has always been a very friendly place. It was an odd time when I came into films. It was all by accident. You know, my mother worked for Anne Margaret, the actress performer.
Right.
So I grew up around that.
Okay, so it was that's right. It was more familiar than not familiar.
Exactly.
So you had a glimpse of it.
Completely unattainable.
Was your mother in costuming for Anne Margaret?
Hair and makeup, yeah.
Wow, for Anne Margaret.
Yeah. So I grew up around it, but she was just a goddess,
Of
and I
course.
was a, skinny little girl in the background. But I did meet an agent backstage
Mm.
at her Vegas show
Oh,
with Elvis Presley, the two of them at the Hilton. And he said, you're pretty, you should be in movies. And I thought, oh, okay. He's authority. If he says I
that
can do
sounds
it.
easy.
Yeah, if he says I should, okay, sure, no
Yeah,
problem.
yeah.
The business it was embarrassingly easy the way it came to me, but then I had to go to work hard.
Because it's a time machine moment that I have to ask you this. Do you remember the Anne Margaret show and the Elvis show? Were they good shows? Did you sit and watch Anne Margaret on stage and Elvis on stage?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you remember it was good.
Absolutely.
They were
And
good shows,
Siegfried
right?
and Roy and
Yeah.
all the, those days. And I think Elvis and Anne Margaret, they kept Vegas alive.
Yes, they were the two biggest stars on the
Yeah,
strip back then.
when
yeah.
it was a hard time.
Yeah, interesting. Moving forward from your beginnings, in 1979, you wind up in a movie called 10, the number 10, directed and written by a man named Blake Edwards, Hollywood legend. And the success of the movie, it wasn't simply a hit. It wasn't simply a big comedy. It was not simply an American hit. It was a global cultural phenomenon. Did you find that people were talking to you about issues of being a woman or being an object of attention? Today, everything is so political. How do you remember that moment in terms of it sweeping you up into a bigger discussion?
I think for me, it was so unusual because I didn't expect it. No one expected it. I'm only in the movie about 10 minutes. Orion Films was the studio that made the film. They had blacklisted me for a stupid reason, but they were calling around town telling people not to hire me, that I was trouble. It was just...
And then Dudley was not a big star at that moment. Blake was on sort of a little bit of a not so hot moment.
Yeah.
So the movie comes out of kind of nowhere.
Yeah. Warner Brothers distributed the movie. They had a feeling and an instinct. And so they promoted it very well. I remember there was a Muhammad Ali fight, I think. And there was a commercial for the movie during the fight. And it was me running on the beach. And my husband, who I said grew up in the business, he turned to me and he said, our lives are forever different.
John knew.
He knew.
He knew.
He hadn't even seen the movie, but he saw the commercial.
Yeah.
And then when we went to see the movie, I'm not saying it's me because that's a manufactured Hollywood thing. When I was running on the beach, turning and looking at Dudley, people gasped. But that was the photographer, that was Blake, that was everybody. I was just
And Bo.
the thing. No, I was.
You take a little credit there.
But it was very
Yeah.
strange, and he was right. And and immediately I had, paparazzi living outside my door. I was so unprepared. I didn't have an agent. I didn't have PR. I was so unprepared.
And is there anything today that you might compare it to in terms of the attention? I mean, I would compare it to Taylor Swift today because she's constantly everywhere, in the news every day. I was around in 79. It sort of seems like Bo Derek and 10 was sort of everywhere because you were at parties and people were talking about it. That's what I mean. It wasn't just a movie,
It was very strange, and funny you should mention Taylor Swift. Everyth's more global now. But as far as the curiosity and the interest, it was powerful for sure. I didn't plan it. It wasn't orchestrated like Taylor Swift has an empire and an empire behind her.
Yeah.
So my situation was different because I had nothing to do with it. But I think part of it is also because no one knew who I was.
Yeah.
I hadn't worked my way up in the business. That was my first movie.
Yeah.
I wasn't dealing with the studio. There was no press. I wasn't in the press kit.
Yeah. Wow. And I wonder, do you remember if John was involved or paying attention to what Warner's was doing? Because Warner's did do a great job promoting the film, the poster
Yeah.
and the campaign, and they weren't sleeping. You know, they
No.
must have tested the movie, and it must have tested really well. But do you remember if John was sort of like keeping track of that at all or not?
They drove up. They knew I'd had a big fight with Orion Pictures.
Mhm.
So they drove up to our ranch, which is 3 hours out of Los Angeles. And they showed us what they wanted to do, tried to prove to me that they were separate from Orion Pictures. And we liked them.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked them. My husband liked them. My husband had shot a lot of beautiful still photographs during the filming of the movie. We just gave them everything. I went on a world tour for the
Yeah.
movie. So, I'm not difficult.
Mhm.
I'm just very choosy as to who I
Sure.
give my time to.
Yeah. And with Warner Brothers at that moment, you got the best of the big studio promotion machine. There was a guy there in publicity named Joe Hyams. I don't know if he was doing it in '79, but I remember over the decades, there were so many absolute pros,
Yeah.
like the thing they did to promote Bonnie and Clyde 10 years earlier. I mean,
Right?
they really, there's a mistake that people make that they didn't support Bonnie and Clyde. It's really not the real story.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wrote about it in Variety. You can read it.
I'm going to.
The view of Bo Derek and the character in 10 created a lot of op-eds, a lot of opinion page discussions of femininity and male menopause and men's fantasies and all of that. Do you think that when you came into this moment, first moment of fame and the discussions, do you think the place of women in the business and in the world has significantly changed since then? And if so,
Yes.
how would you describe the change? If someone young said to you, what's the biggest difference between '79 and today, what would you tell them?
When I was working, maybe you can say I'm wrong, but there was a time in the 70s, and I was just at the end of it. We were all kind of, except for a few.
Mhm.
There was a Meryl Streep, there was always a Betty Davis, there was a few, but in the 70s, we were Bond girls. We were
Sure.
Baubles.
The Playboy caricature
Yeah.
caricature of women and the Playboy culture was very much dominant.
Very much, and the screenplays weren't written for a woman to have a significant part in the storytelling.
Yeah.
It was to help support the man,
Yeah.
show can appreciate women, or he's, a great lover, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And as I said, I admire, Meryl Streep. She's a goddess, and she overcame that. I didn't have the knowledge or the skill to overcome that myself, but I wasn't ever expected to be good.
Sure.
It was,
And
no one cared.
And the expectations and the movies themselves, if you start running through all the hit movies of that period, you do find, generally speaking,
Yeah.
that there's sort of either action movies that are male focused to the almost extinction of female characters. There aren't female-led action movies until Ridley and Sigourney do Alien.
Yes. Yes. And now when I look at someone like Jennifer Lawrence
Yeah.
and how she's just doing it all with such gusto,
Yeah.
and it's seemingly, and she seems to really enjoy it. And my hats off.
So there
to her.
really are new opportunities.
But that's streaming. That's all of the outlets now. I mean, we haven't stopped consuming entertainment. It's more and more and more. You don't have, you know what, there were 3 major motion pictures when I was working,
Yeah.
motion picture studios.
Yeah.
So you had to fit in.
Yeah.
Every film had to cover,
Yeah.
you know, a third of an audience. So
Yeah.
I love it.
It's become very, I think also the purpose of movies and the culture investigating stories from disenfranchised communities, from other points of view,
Yes.
not just, I mean, my wife and I, when we watch older movies now, invariably she will say at some point, it was insane, wasn't it, that there were no people of color?
Yeah.
That the whole world was white in Hollywood movies with tiny little exceptions here and there. But she's embarrassed by it. She's
It
almost
is.
hurt by it.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
Me
so that's
too.
positive. That's a positive change.
And it doesn't have to be a blockbuster.
Yeah.
You know, a low budget
the
film
indies,
can
yeah.
take over.
Yeah.
When I was doing independent films, they were really under the table.
Yeah. Yeah. That changed a lot in the 90s and afterwards. But if you were to talk to a young woman about a career in Hollywood, whether she's an actress or wants to be a producer or a writer, an executive, an agent, whatever, but she's a young woman, she's starting a career in Hollywood, is there any kind of advice or thoughts that you would share that you think are relevant today, or do you think it's changed so much you wouldn't dare give advice?
It's still storytelling, no matter
Still
what.
storytelling.
It's still storytelling, and it's a craft, it's a skill, it's an art. And I think that I don't care what you think your career path is going to be in this industry.
Right.
You know, they say there are no small parts. There are no small jobs.
Yes.
The more you know every job on the set, pre-production, post-production, marketing, whatever it is, it's going to help you.
Yeah.
It's going to help you identify with everyone's job. I got to experience some of that when I was producing my films. And, you know, we were off in third world locations. And I would be counting the money for payroll myself, whatever it took. But it really helps you understand this. It's all, even though it's an art, you should know how to, every paintbrush, every aspect of it.
That's fascinating you say that. At Tiziana's Filming Italy Masterclasses, one of the questions that my director partner and I got was a question about preparation. And I thought, boy, this young person is asking the right question, because the key to everything is to be prepared.
Yeah.
Because if you go to every day of shooting, you're going to have surprises. You can never be totally prepared.
Yeah.
So you better be as prepared as you possibly can be. But I like also that you say it will benefit you because understanding what everyone does makes you able to appreciate how it works and the difference between someone doing it right and someone doing it wrong.
Definitely. Until you have had to schedule a shooting schedule, you know, you've been involved in the strips, you don't understand what's going on the set. You really don't. And you should try to be able to do everyone's job.
Yeah.
It's the only way you're going to be able to find real talent.
Yeah. It's also care about what you're doing and lean into it. There's a great story about Sam Peckinpah, the director, making a movie, and some kid who is like 400 yards out from the main scene, who's like standing next to a light fixture or something, you know, a lighting stand, says when Peckinpah comes by, "Mr. Peckinpah, could I read the script?" And he says, "What are you doing on the picture?" He says, "I'm in charge of this light out here, but I want to know more about what the story is that we're telling." And Sam said, "I like that kid."
That's right. That's right.
You know?
And if you have the right attitude, believe me, you will move up and up and up that ladder.
Yes,
We
people
were
notice.
doing it constantly. We had a young film student come knock on our editing room door at MGM, and immediately we just loved his enthusiasm, his
Yeah.
intelligence.
Yeah.
He's now the top of post production,
There you go.
pretty much in the industry.
Wow. Yeah, caring and paying attention and being engaged in the work, you see it
Yeah,
immediately if you're making a movie.
right away.
If you've only made one movie, you know the
Yeah.
difference between that.
And as an actor, when you can understand really the pressure everyone else around you has
Mhm.
and the pressure they're under for their job, it just helps you be a better actor too.
Now, when I asked you about some advice for a young woman in the industry, you had mentioned storytelling, and storytelling is timeless. We're in front of something that proves the stories, whether it be from the Bible or from before the Bible, the powerful stories that tell us about our own destiny, our humanity, our relationship to God. These stories that never end. But let me ask you, have men changed since 1979? Are men still just men?
Yes, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Yes, I hardly work anymore, but occasionally I do. But it's all for the better. The Me Too movement.
better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's going to be, I'm sorry for some of the men who are being unfairly accused, but that's part of the pendulum, I'm afraid.
And by the way, there are many accused and convicted and
guilty.
proven and guilty.
Guilty. Yes. And I had some of it. My first husband was a tough guy, so I think there was a bit of a hands off. But yeah, I had some issues myself growing up and in the industry. But it's so much better. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this movement.
So in 7 years, you really believe it's a better place for women to work because something that never was changing actually started to change in the right direction finally.
Finally, and I was surprised because I grew up in women's movement,
Yeah.
in women's liberation,
in the
burn
60s,
the bra,
yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And then it seems we just sort of kept stagnant for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think cultural movements sometimes take a bump.
It is strange because you're making a good point that people of our generation, there really was a liberation, not just women's liberation, but a more respectfulness, men and women, and to the environment. There were so many idealistic things in the 60s and early 70s that by the 80s, it seemed like everybody just sort of gave up and said, oh, well, forget that,
It's done. We did it.
We did
Everyone's
it.
equal now.
Yeah.
And
we
then
won, but we didn't really,
Yeah.
So, we were talking about this also the other night. You've managed to live in Hollywood, be part of Hollywood, have Hollywood success, and you have gone through this, and in my view, an incredibly healthy person, a healthy human being, a empathetic, intelligent, plugged in person. And I wonder if you have seen in Hollywood examples of people that you would say lived a healthy life in Hollywood and those who didn't live in a healthy life, does Hollywood contribute to a lack of health, or is it start where you come to Hollywood and you're not really together and Hollywood crushes you? Do you see what I'm saying about health and lack of health in Hollywood? I'm not talking about yoga. I'm talking about mental peacefulness, being centered, staying on an even keel. Any thoughts about what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I've seen, I mean, the business can beat you up like no other, I'm sure. Wall Street, maybe, the pressure in our business is, you have Wall Street. Look at what that does to people wanting money.
Yeah.
Most people would throw that away for fame.
Wow. Yeah.
So the pressure is
Yeah.
amplified so much.
Yeah.
I was fortunate that although I can't believe what I've achieved in this industry, it wasn't always the most important thing to me. That expression that you would kill for it or you would die for it. I mean, that's so tragic to me.
Do you think that your connectivity to your family has been a source of balance and strength?
Always. Always. I was brought up in a very happy family, not overly sentimental for sure. What was more important was, the waves, for surfing in the daytime in Southern California. And I attribute a lot to my father. My father had, he had left the Midwest to come to beautiful California, the dream. And everything to him was, I'd say, Dad, I did this and this and this. Yes, but are you happy? And I could make an argument that it is important to ask yourself and stop for a moment, am I happy? And I think you'll do your best work too when you're happy. That doesn't mean you don't get tortured and miserable. And that's part of being happy too sometimes.
Right. But you're right. I watched a documentary recently about one of the sexual abuse figures, and the young men in this case were talking about the harassment that they endured. And every one of them said they endured it because they came to Hollywood to make it. And they thought that this person was going to open the door for them, and they wanted that thing.
I know.
And they crushed their spirits to learn there were people who were not looking out for them, who didn't want to just help them, who wanted something from them and treated them badly.
They're predators.
Predators.
They're clever.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
They're there.
Yep.
Are there mistakes that you've seen people make that are frequent enough, or they've happened over and over? Are there common pitfalls or common mistakes that you've seen people make in Hollywood, whether they be actors or what's your idea of a person that took the wrong path, that chose the wrong way to do things? What's a common mistake that people make when they come and work in Hollywood?
The most common, and I caught myself early, thank goodness, is being difficult.
Yeah.
When you're the engine driving, the 200 people on the set, and that's how they get their paycheck, is because you're driving the movie. They just put you on a pedestal, and it's almost expected in a way to be difficult. And when you learn that so many of your idols and heroes were difficult, you slip into it.
There's a temptation there, isn't there?
And support.
Yeah.
It's more than temptation. There's support to be that way.
Support to be bad.
To be bad, because then the ones that are supporting you while and helping you be bad, they get into your mind and into your little group, and they'll feed it. It's so complicated.
It's insidious.
So no matter what, don't, and you won't do your best work either.
I had a psychologist pal when I was about 30 and started writing movies. He took me aside one day and he said, "Steve, I think you're becoming somebody you don't want to become."
Really?
Yeah. I never forgot it.
Yeah.
It was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
He said, "Calm down, man.
Yeah.
Take a breath."
It's hard, and you're inevitably, you will always be sleep deprived, hungry usually too. All these reasons why you're edgy, and it'll get you, but jump out of it.
I hope we have another minute or two. One thing I wanted to talk to you about, because we had a very rewarding conversation we started on the subject. How old were you the first time you got on a horse?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, if a pony counts, I grew up in the concrete suburbs of Southern California, and people.
Not a lot of horses in Torrance and.
No, but there were Guys
Pony
with
rides.
pony rides and a camera, and you could be Elizabeth Taylor English style, or um, Roy Rogers' wife,
Dale Evans.
cowgirl, Dale Evans, and I was the cowgirl, and I still have a picture. I think I was 6 years old.
When did
Howdy,
you?
partner.
When did your serious relationship with the equestrian world take a serious turn, and you started to ride, and know that it was going to be part of your life for the rest of your life?
You know, I think I was born with it. I think they'll find there's a genetic code that makes you an artist, makes you love whatever it is, nature. And I think they'll find someday that there is one for horses, but for good reason. You know, our history is so intertwined with these animals. Our histories, you know, is made on the back
Yeah.
of a horse. So I think there's something very deep.
It's grounding, and it's humbling, and it's connective to the earth and to nature and to life, and maybe that is part of what is contributing to what I call the Bo Derek health, survival, positive energy that is on display so wonderfully.
Well, thank you. I'll just say I'm the luckiest girl you know.
And you ride how often?
Now a few times a week.
A few times a week.
Yeah.
But when I asked
But I
you,
take care of my horses. I'm with them every day.
I think you were even saying to me that your job is you clean out the stables, and
I do.
you know it's not you don't have someone doing the work for you. You're doing the work.
I have no one doing the work, caring for the horses.
And on a more serious note, you're involved in the issues around animal protection. And can you talk a little about what your life is in terms of that cause? And we'll call it animal rights, and then you can correct me and tell me what you call it.
No, it's fine. I'm very fortunate to. It's very strange. You're 10 minutes in a movie, and all of a sudden, whatever you're interested in, doors open for you. And my interest is the ocean, in animals, particularly horses, because they're such a part of our lives and they tend to get abused. So I've been involved in our wild horse issue, horse slaughter for human consumption. And it led me with Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was governor of California, asked if I would be a racing commissioner, horse racing commissioner.
I hope Arnold was on the right side of this issue.
Yeah, he was governor, and it's a huge industry.
But he reached out to you because he knew of your passion.
He knew of my passion, and I said, I don't know that much about racing. He said, you're a woman. I said, I'm a fan of the sport, I think. And he said, please go be a commissioner for me and look after the horses and the riders, all the safety issues.
Yeah.
It was another chapter of my life that I love.
And today, you know, you're really working kind of in the trenches in politics and lobbying and the things that have nothing to do with riding in the sunset. They have to do with being in rooms with politicians and businessmen and cattle interest.
Yes.
It's hard work.
When I first went to Washington to work on the horse issues, senators and congressmen and presidents would come out to the hallway, say, please come in my office. Now they see me, they run the other way.
I would like to thank you, really, Bo Derek, because really she was very generous, because we have a lot of students watch us on Metaverso. And I want the last question, you know, just an advice for all the students that maybe, you know, dream to become an actress, to become an amazing artist, you know, and what you can suggest to the new generation.
I would say, as I was saying before, do every job. If you're not making a living in the film industry, go be an assistant. There's no small job in films. Whatever you do, the tiniest, I don't care if you're sweeping the floor on a set, you're going to be learning. And when you become the big director or producer or agent, whatever you want to be, you'll be better.
I'm sure, because, you know, they have to know to do everything. I'm agree.
Everything.
You know, you must
Like Tiziana.
know, yes, the ground.
Yeah, like
You have
Tiziana.
to start from the ground. And
Yes.
You do everything.
yes. Thank you so much, Bo.
Thank you.
And thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Steve.
Thank you.